Well, good morning. Happy Monday to you all. It is a very dreary day outside, but it's cheery in here in our Zoom webinar. So thank you, Brad Deetscreek, for joining me today. My name is Eric Miller. I'm the Director of Ministry Operations with CE National. We've got Brad Deetscreek with us. He is the lead pastor of family ministry at Grace Church in Bath. Excited to have you on today. We're going to be talking about parenting. How do you engage parents within a student ministry context? So, Brad, you're an expert in this field primarily because you're a dad. So,
Yeah,
happy Father's Day.
thank
Uh,
you.
you have four boys. What are the age ranges of your boys?
Yeah, I have four boys. They're wonderful. Finn is 20. Just going to start his third year of college here in the fall. Sully is 17. He'll be a senior in high school. Killian is 15. He'll be a 10th grader. And then Sawyer, our fourth one, he's 8, and he'll be a third grader. So we're spread all around the parenting, and it's kind of wild and just kind of hanging on for the ride right now.
I think you and Tara could just start your own little youth ministry with your family. This is awesome. It's great.
Yeah, except they probably wouldn't want to come if I was leading it. They'd be like, "Oh, that's enough, Dad."
No, thanks. We're good. Yeah.
Let me guess, Dad. That verse is in James. Thanks a lot, Dad.
Well, happy Father's Day. I hope it was a blessed day for
Yeah,
you.
awesome.
We're excited about getting to talk today about just we know that in years of youth ministry, it can be hard when you get hired to be a youth pastor, right? Maybe like you, I know when I started as a youth pastor, I was a youth pastor for 17 years. You start right out of college, you're like, you're 21 years old and you're hired to do student ministry. And it can be hard to even think about how do you build a connection or a ministry to engage parents. So we're going to dive into that topic today. We're going to talk about that. Our goal for this conversation is really just to help equip anyone that's leading a student ministry, whether you're a full-time youth pastor, whether you're a youth worker, whether you're a volunteer, maybe the lead pastor at your church asked you to help serve the youth ministry because you have some teens. So thank you for serving, and we want to help equip you. So likely you were hired, like we were just saying, to work with youth. Your primary focus is going to be the students. We get that. That's great. But how do you complement with parents? What does that look like? So today we just want to aim this conversation at helping to support you, and hopefully it'll complement your ministry well. So Brad, let's dive in. Let's just talk this through a little bit here. In student ministry, give us your history, your background, even on what your role has been throughout the years and the context that you've been in.
Sure. Yeah. So I would have, you know, been one of those people that I started off in college. I mean, I grew up Christian home, all those things, came to know Christ at an early age. I had my bumps along the way, but, doing things like a lot of CE National programming over the years, God really worked in my heart. And then my senior year of college, I kind of shifted. I felt called into ministry. So I shifted from wanting to get into the medical field to, start pursuing seminary. So I did, so that was like my fall of my senior year. So I thought, what do I do? Here I am with a biology major, almost finishing with that. Do I shift to Bible or what do I do? And so I talked to my pastor growing up, different people, my dad, and they're like, I think you need to go to seminary. So I went off to seminary. And then while I was at seminary, I served as an Operation Barnabas leader. I'm a big proponent of all CE National does. And God used that time to show me a heart for young people. And so when I thought about youth ministry, I thought, this is what I'm called to do. I thought hey, try to be a cool, older than them person who loves Jesus and point them towards Jesus. I don't want to say Messiah complex because that really sounds sacrilegious, but I almost had that, like I could be the knight in shining armor, save the day. Hey, they'll like me. And I was really concerned about them liking me. And, but in good reasons, I wanted them to fall in love with Jesus, but I really wanted to be the reason for that. And so then after I kind of wrapped up seminary, went back to my home church in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and just had the joy of working there. And at the time they were kind of going through a pastoral transition. So I was by myself a lot when it came to that. We had people, good people, great people, but that's what I did. So I thought, how do I just get this youth ministry going? Here's these 30 kids or whatever. How do I get them excited about Jesus? And how can I be the conduit for that? I had no concept at all of working with parents. I have great parents, all that stuff. but I just didn't see any role for them in what I was doing unless it could be helpful. I found parents to be like, oh, they could be helpful for baking.
Yeah.
Transportation, if we don't, if we need an extra driver. But I tried to do, unfortunately, and I say this way, I tried to do as much of the work that I could do. And I would like to say it's because of the culture I was raised in. It was more of a hardworking culture of people that the pastoral, if there's something going on in the church, the pastor had to be there kind of mentality. And they're great people, but I kind of twisted that in the wrong way, made it like I want to do everything and I want to be part of everything. So I got real possessive of ministry. And so I kind of looked at parents of like, I would use them when I needed to, if I needed to. If there were 16 kids and I only had 15 spots in a van, if I wanted to stay legal, I would try to get a parent involved to help drive or something. I mean, I was young, 20, you are 23 years old or whatever, and 24. But then over time that began to shift. And it wasn't like I was at war with parents. I just didn't even think about them.
Yeah.
I just thought it was my job. I'll be honest with you. I thought it was my job to be the spiritual dry cleaner of these children. They drop them off, we get them cleaned up and then send them home, and that's kind of how I viewed my job. So it wasn't at odds with parents, but then over the years, stuff started being written about family ministry. And I remember reading, the basics of family ministry books and stuff like that, where you start looking at the biblical role of a parent in a life of a child and how what would life look like if we would partner with them instead of just looking at them as, oh, they're a necessary or even necessary evil for some of us maybe, but how we can partner with them. And so that's what we started doing, started developing that more and more, started even looking more biblically. I wanted to justify my job because I didn't, people start asking you when you do it for a little bit, hey, do you want to plant a church? Or, hey, do you see yourself, when are you going to be a real pastor? I got that one a lot. What are you going to, that's great. You're doing this stuff for these high school kids, but when are you going to become a real pastor? When are you going to move up? I'm like, move up. This is all I want to do with my whole life, Yeah. And when you start getting into those kind of things, you can kind of start seeing it's like, oh, but then, so I wanted to start justifying what I do. So where's youth ministry show up in the Bible? And it's a lot easier to find parenting stuff in the Bible. So that's kind of where I started realizing that a lot more. And people have been so influential in my life over the years, but books and then learning. And then one of the big things for me was transitioning out here to Ohio, Akron, Ohio. They were working with Jeff Bogue, my pastor, and working with him. And here I've realized, I started working with him. I started realizing if I'm doing everything, I'm not being a good leader. I'm like, oh, that's a whole different cultural shift. And why aren't we working with parents more? I'm like, oh, I think it's important, and Jeff's always been one who's like, it'd be better to spend more time. It'd be better if you had 1 hour to spend it with, he would say Billy's dad than it is to actually spend with Billy. So, I mean, I was the one who was always at the soccer games, always at the football games. I thought, always playing video games. And that's good. All that stuff's fine. But I started then understanding I need to start spending more time with parents. And I think that's where I am. So now as my kind of working myself by multiplying yourself and stuff, I kind of worked myself out of a job in student ministries. We hired a guy, Todd Shoemaker, who's awesome. Big, just does a great thing for youth ministry here. He's great to work with. But I kind of ran out of my role. So they started this role for me called lead pastor of family ministry. So I work on making sure that our children's ministry, our student ministries, and now even our college ministries are working together, partnering with parents, coming alongside them and saying, how do we work together to get the child, whereas bring the best things of the church, along with the family, people in whether it be D6, whether it be the orange people or not orange people, but the orange philosophy. I guess orange people would be Oompa Loompas probably.
Yeah.
But, but that all those things. And there's good voices that are out there now talking about, it's almost like the families here, the churches here. It's like the banks of a riverbed kind of pointing the stream of the child to follow Jesus. So that's kind of where we're at now. It's hard. It's hard because I'm being a parent. I learn a lot, but it's hard because so much you work, you want to devote to your programs, but working with parents is all relational, so that's where we find ourselves a lot.
Yeah. Brad, thanks for sharing that. Cause I think it's helpful to understand the context of that. You're not, it's not like you just kind of fell into this position and like, hey, I've been a youth pastor and now like, oh, let's do something new and let's be a family. Like God has taken you on a journey,
Hmm.
and there are things that you've learned along the way, which is part of the reason we want to have you on this digital app today, to share with your experience and to share with us just some of the things that you've learned and seen in the benefits of having a student ministry that includes engaging parents. So, yeah, thank you for sharing all that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's, you have tons of experience. You know, a lot of the things we're talking about, right? Working with it, and you see the joys and the benefits of the body. I mean, I'm a big believer in the local church, and the fact that we get to work together with families and stuff, it's amazing,
Yeah. So let's just ask this. And by the way, for our viewers, those of you maybe watching on Facebook Live with us, drop a question if you have a question or something that comes up and you'd like to engage with either Brad or myself. Ask that question in the comments down below, and it'll get to us, and we'll talk that through. But Brad, I'm just curious, like, what encouragement would you give, knowing what you know now, to, let's say, your son or somebody enters into a new role as a youth pastor? What encouragement would you give them to engage in parents, or what maybe advice would you give them?
Yeah, I would hopefully get them a lot further along than where I was at that time. Not that there's wrong ways to do things, but I think biblically the best way is to invest in parents. And so I'd say, look at your time. I really believe we're spirit-led people as Christ followers. So that's where I'm coming from. And the Lord will direct us, and He shaped us in a way. But I would say spend time thinking, what is the best thing for these students? We know we only have them for a small chunk of time. And I would tell my boys, if they wanted to do youth ministry, think about what can you do to make that small chunk of time that you have with them the most effective way to engage them, to be passionate, to get a taste of who Jesus is, to engage them with good community and show them how to serve, and try to do as much as you can. But then use the rest of your time to think, now, what are we doing with them? What are they doing Tuesday? How's the best way to equip them in thinking, boy, I can teach them a lot, but parents are with them so much more. I was just with my kids on vacation for a week. So blessed to be able to have family and children, and I feel so spoiled with that. But it's funny, the older they get, the more I realize there are things that I've taught them that they've learned from my wife and myself, just because they're being around us so much, and parents have had a lot of that influence, especially now with this whole thing with how COVID has kind of restructured a lot of family situations. And I know I just pray so much for our families that are difficult, because I can't imagine, for some of our kids, it's not parents are investing in them. For some of our kids, it's the best thing for them is to be away from their parents because it's painful. But a lot of ways in the church, COVID has kind of shifted how we think about family and stuff. So I would encourage them to spend some time and try to invest with people, and not let other people tell you what you can't do, but believe in who Jesus has made you to be. Because one of the lies we've all heard when we were young, well, you're not a parent. Well, you'll see different once you have kids. And I did. I learned a lot different. But that doesn't mean that I didn't have good things to tell a parent.
Right.
I think you think about as a youth pastor or student ministries, whatever your role is, you think about the wealth of information you are for a parent. If you kind of look at, if you build a relationship with parents, they can use you because you see kids all the time. You have so much information. They can read about it in books, what our culture's like, read about Gen Z or here comes Generation Alpha down, or what. They can read about it. Those things are great. But the best research is the people who are with kids all the time, and it's trying to help parents say, well, what do parents, I tell my boys, what do they need?
Yeah.
What do they need? What do they need help in? They might not need help disciplining their kids, but they might need help saying, I don't understand the culture my kid is in. And you could do that research, for them, and because you live it every day.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's just using your time wisely and say, how can I don't know, use it the best way I can,
Yeah, that's really good. I think it's important to speak to some of these younger guys who are just getting started, or maybe it's a volunteer that, hey, you're the young person in our church. Why don't you work with the youth ministry? And we've seen that too. And none of those are bad things, but we've got to, like you said, point them in the right direction and help them think through logically, right? Biblically, what's the roles that God has designed, and how do we play a part in that?
Because these parents love their children for the most part. We know there's always outlier things, and we can always but for the most part, they love their children, and they are, some of them, you have a whole wide range of parents. You have some parents that are they have different names for them all. The snowplow parents, right? They're just trying to plow everything out of the way to make their kids' life as easy as possible. You have some that are helicopters. Who's going to hand my child their vitamin on, do you have someone when they're away at camp who's going to give my kid their vitamin because they take that, and my kid has to have their cell phone because I need to be able to be in touch with them 24/7. And I track them on their Life 360. I need to know. So you got the helicopter parents, and then you got some that are just the free parents. I'm kind of like this a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. I have kids. They're probably out in the grass somewhere, and then you have some that are just totally aloof and broken. So it's like you got them in there, but they love their kids more than you do, and
Sure.
They'll be invested with them long after you're gone with them, so how do you help them, say because parents right now, a lot of them are like, I want my kid to be safe. Well, what can I do to help my kid make sure that there's a safe environment for my children? What does that look like? And
which I want to talk to you in just a second here about some of those ideas that we might be able to do in ministry that will help engage with parents. But before we get to that, one other question I had: why do you think this negative stigma exists towards parents in youth ministry culture? Like, what is that? Where did that come from?
I think it's probably, I don't know. I think we're a little bit mavericks, right? I mean, come on, in youth ministry, we'd like to do the game that can kind of push the limits as far as we can. So, and nowadays it'd be great for social media or whatever. So we could push the limits, as far as we can, but not really have a kid get hurt, but kind of push that edge a little bit. Or when we're in youth ministry, a lot of times we're the ones who are like, when someone says, well, you can't do that, we're like, well, really? Well, why can't I? I mean, I remember back whenever I was in youth ministry, we used to play that game Sardines, where they would shut off all the lights in the church, and they would tell guys and girls to be on teams together and go hide and be still in corners. Well, if you're a parent and you find out that your kid was in a hallway under a stairwell with a girl for an hour in the dark at church, as a parent, you're like, wait a second. What are we doing here? So I think some of those things, parents trying to pull back the reins a little bit, saying, wait, I don't know if it's good. And some of that's good, but I think we're afraid of what parents think, or parents nowadays telling us about all their kids' allergies. Sometimes it'd be better if the parent didn't know. We'd feel like, it feels like it's just they bring restriction.
Yeah.
And I think some of it's insecurity, because we want to be, I think for a lot of us, we want to be their answer to point them to Jesus. We know Jesus is the answer, but we want to be the one.
Right.
And I think there's some insecurity that's in there because we maybe never had kids, or, and we're intimidated by them.
No, that's so good. I think you're exactly right. It's that tension between the youth worker, the youth pastor, and the parent. And oftentimes I saw this to be true in my own ministry when I was, a young single guy, 20-something, and I didn't have kids. You're right. I knew student culture, but I didn't know parenting. And so I think I felt that disconnect of let me do my job and engage your students and provide spiritual programming, and we're going to do Bible studies. But I didn't think of the other side of it. And parents often don't think of the side of like what the youth pastor, the youth worker is trying to do. They maybe see it as, hey, this is a time where we can go have a date night. We're going to drop our kids off and they're going to get something good. And it's different perspectives.
And
yeah.
I think some of it is too, we, if we're not close to somebody, we build opinions about them. I think that's a lot of the problems in our culture, because we're not interacting with people. So we build these opinions, or we have these structures that are built. And I think sometimes when you think about parents, so think about history of youth ministry, we've had a tendency to silo. We've had a tendency to build our own worlds. We build our own church inside of a church. And what happens is we're never around parents. And so we build these presuppositions up about parents in our mind. I think sometimes we're like, oh, they're probably like this. They're probably thinking this. They're like, and I just want to build my world over here. And we kind of separate ourselves. But I think as we start getting closer, parents realize it's like, oh, that might just be an outlier that feels that way. 90% of these parents are totally supportive of what I'm doing. Right, they just don't know you sometimes, because we've kind of done that to ourselves. We've distanced ourselves from them.
Yeah.
And I've done all that. I can say we, because I've done all of that. I'm guilty. I'm here repenting to you today, Eric. My gifts will be at the altar.
I'm with you. Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think those are things that sometimes we see when you're pumped about something, and then like that was awesome, and then a parent comes and they're just like the wet blanket, and you're like, no, but like, and that feeling can often, I think, create that negative stigma towards
Yeah,
parents.
you're right.
And if as youth pastors, youth workers, if we're not humble and willing to like own, okay, that I see your point, or see the other side, or understand, right, and not make those assumptions like you're talking about, it's tough. It can create those wedges for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's time for to be a big boy or big girl and deal with it, right? Stop whining about it, figure out how to fix it. And, the Lord has put you in that place, and unless you're not equipped for it, then it's like maybe find another place. But if you feel like that's where the Lord has led you to by his Spirit, then, then go after it. But a humble servant like Jesus, our model, was.
Yeah. And even understanding like we're all on the same team. Like we're in this together. We need each other. Like you were saying, from a parent's perspective, to understand that the youth worker is the best resource in student culture, and for a youth worker, youth pastor, to understand that these parents are the primary discipler of these students. They're going to have the best spiritual influence on the students that we know and love. And the reality is, you said it, we really only get an hour a week with them if we're lucky, 2 tops, right?
Yeah.
And yet it's foolish for us as youth pastors to think that hour or 2, if they're a regular attender, is going to equate to any significant spiritual growth, especially outside of their parents.
Yeah.
Man, so let's talk that through then. How do you engage, or what are maybe some things that you've done or seen that you can engage or partner with parents on a better level? And maybe we even need to think inside and outside of the church, or those who are believers or non-believers. What are some things you guys have done there at Grace to help partner with parents?
Well, I think some of it is for people you don't understand, or it's like, well, we know we have to, or we should use them. It's the best thing. I think it's getting them together, getting them close to you. So we've done parent type of groups before. Some of those tried classes, we've tried a bunch of things. And some of those things have worked for a few, and some didn't work for any of them, and some worked for a lot of things. So, I think it's finding areas in which we can look at the church and say, okay, what can the church provide for a parent that is helpful to them? So I kind of look at us, and that might, and what I'm going to say might go against what some of us think sometimes, and just like kind of hear my heart through all of this. And of course, this is just opinions and stuff, but I kind of look at our ministries, and I'm trying to work with our teams to look at our ministries as a toolbox with tools in it. Any of our church programs, like our mission trips, like for our mission trips or go teams, we call them, we invite parents to come along on all of them, things like that. But you look at all that stuff, I kind of look at our church, say, here we go. Here's our family ministry toolbox, if you will. If there's a tool in there that helps you with your 15-year-old, AKA maybe a life group to get them with other 15-year-old boys so that they can understand, where they can have good friendships. But then also in the life groups, we say, hey, but we have other God-fearing adults who will come alongside your child, who will reinforce what they learn from you at home, but will be another voice in their life. Every child needs their little tribe around them to support, all of that stuff. And so we say, well, then here's a tool. Go ahead, use our life groups. Use it. If it doesn't help you, you have to have the humility to say, then don't use it.
Yeah.
And what that does, I think it communicates to parents a lot. It's like, you're not using their children to build your programs. But what you're saying to a parent is saying, I'm just really coming along. So a lot of times parents would say to me, Jimmy, I would love for him to get involved in youth group, but his friends are connected in another place and he connects better there. Should I make him come to yours at our church or whatever? I said, sometimes I'm like, listen, if it helps Jimmy grow closer to Jesus, I'll give him a ride if he needs it, appropriately or whatever. Just trying to give that mentality to say, it's not about our programs. I think that's one of the biggest things that's hurt our relationship with parents, is we've made it about our programs too many times. And we're just doing what we can do. We're just trying to figure out, and let's be honest, we invest a lot of time in them to make them the best that we can. But I think that's one thing we've really tried to do, is create a culture where we tell parents and communicate. Parents is like, we hold all of our programs with open hands. This is the way we feel it's best way to do it. Now, if there's something I'm doing that's causing a roadblock, that's causing a kid not to want to come, tell me, and we'll address that. But other than that, So I think that's one way. And then we try to provide opportunities to talk to them about, just to experience things. We invite our parents to be part of our trips and stuff like that. And they don't always can't take advantage of it because it costs money to go to Haiti with your child and things like that. But the ones who do, because I thought, man, if you're working with someone and you're experiencing that with your parent, they'll have a memory, a spiritual experience that they'll always be there for them. So that's why we always take a lot of parents with us to Urban Hope and things like that, because
Yeah.
those are some things I think that have worked well. And we're trying to connect with parents when it makes sense with them with their schedule, But so in some areas we do really well. In some areas we just have a long way to go. We have a lot of learning to do.
Yeah, I know a lot of churches often will have, or youth ministries especially, will have parents' night at the beginning of the school year, things like that. We tried that for a while in Frederick in my days as youth pastor there. But one of the best things that we found was we said we want to have an open door policy. Parents are welcome to come sit in anytime. Now, we wouldn't let them join small groups or any time but the large group gathering, parents were welcome to come check out what we were doing. And oftentimes that then turned into some of our best recruiting for volunteers, because parents would come and they're like, hey, this was cool. We liked what you guys were doing. Or, man, I got something out of this. And well, then come, keep helping. And that built some of those relationships where it was an easy pathway to add to your team, to engage with parents, to let, we're not trying to hide anything that we're doing. It's having that open-handed, open mindset. Yeah.
And then, and I think that's great. And I would even say some of those things, we would say that here, but we would encourage parents to, hey, you can come as a guest to check it out. If you want to come consistently, of course, because we always want to reinforce safety, right? We're big on the clearances, proactive. The reactive thing, we do the background check to see what people have done in the past, but the proactive thing of training of our leaders, because we also want to communicate to parents, we take your child's safety. We're not going to very seriously, we care very much about that, and I think that's a good way to communicate to them. Say, hey, you can come along with stuff, but here's the protocol you have to do. So everyone who goes on a missions trip, I don't care if it's, if they're a parent who's been in our church for 30 years, they have to go through the same training, background check, proactive leading, look at the meetings and the awkward videos. They have to do that just as much as everybody else does if they want to go on a trip.
Yep. No, that's really good. Yeah. So let's talk for a minute. Okay. So you're the new 20-something youth pastor, youth worker. You're in charge of your student ministry. And what would be some things that those guys could do to engage parents, to help them build that relationship? Because maybe it doesn't happen as naturally for them.
I think, in fact, this is the kind of, this has helped me right now. The kind of with the stuff that's going on with race in our world right now, I'm trying to be a listener and a learner, because I have a lot to learn and a lot of things to listen to. I'm not an authority in those areas. So I think of that too when it comes to, so I'm 23 years old, starting in ministry. I go to a church. I don't know what it looks like to parent kids. And maybe you've moved to a new culture that's not even where you're normally from. So I think the best thing to do would be give opportunities to put yourself around parents so you can listen and learn from them, and they might have some bad ideas, but what you're mostly going to get from that is you're going to get allies, because you're going to learn a lot about their kids, and you're going to learn, it's oh, these guys, they have gifts that they can use, so maybe you're not very administrative. Maybe a parent is a perfect one to help you with the check-in of the people that are going on the retreat. Maybe you're not really good with maybe your budget's small and you don't have ways that you need to put some food would be really good for this meeting. It's well, then you have your little focus group or your parent group that you invited any parent to come to from your church, or they could bring their peers to. And then maybe you have them who they might have other connections, and then you only do what you can do. But I think if you listen, and I think it shows a lot,
Yes.
Say, hey, teach me about your children. Tell me all about your kids. Ask good questions. So create an environment like that, which I think anybody could do. So if you're a typical Sunday morning church, maybe it's having a small lunch for parents afterwards. We're always good at having the fundraisers or the parties, but maybe have something for parents. Say, hey, I just love to know more about you. And if you could start that at the beginning, I think it would set you up, because parents, they want to know who you are too, because they probably have their own fears and suspicions.
Yeah, let them ask questions to you, right? And
Yeah.
get to know who you are and what's your philosophy of ministry. And yeah.
Because you're not perfect. and you don't know everything, but you know a lot more than parents do. And when it comes to, there's a reason why you're the professional, or if you're the key volunteer. There's a reason why someone invited you into that seat. Whether you're the volunteer, maybe you just raise your hand and say, I'll do it. There's a reason why the Lord prompted you to do that. So you have a lot to offer back to the parents as well. But I think once you show yourself as a listener and a learner, I think that parents will listen to that a lot more than from you as well, because you've set it up in a good example.
Yeah, cool. One other thing I would love just to talk through is, what do you do with when you have students that are in your ministry who come, they faithfully attend, you've built a relationship with them, but the parents don't go to your church, or maybe they're not a believer. How do you engage them? Is there any way that you communicate with them? What would a recommendation be of a way that you could build a relationship with parents like that?
Well, I think the biggest challenge you have to figure out is, how do you get their information? How do you get their email? How do you get their thing? And I think another thing, so if people are suspicious of churches right now in our culture, I think a lot of it's because a lack of transparency. So I would communicate, whether a person's a believer or not, exactly what you're trying to do with their kids. And don't be apologetic about it. Don't say, hey, we're just trying to teach your kid good moral values because you're afraid of, like, well, this person doesn't believe in Jesus. No, just be honest. Say, hey, my goal is on Wednesday nights, we want to help your child find out who they are, their identity. That's the biggest questions asked of them whenever that they're asking themselves in their mind over their teenage years before they become an adult. Who am I? We find that the best way they can find that is in the Lord Jesus Christ. And everything we do is about pushing your kid to know who Jesus is, because we believe it's what's best for him or her. We'll love your kid. And, I think transparency is the big thing, but it's fine away. Because let's be honest, Eric, some of the hardest parts are to get parents to get out of their car, the drop-offs, right? We have that here. We're always trying to find ways to get parents to even talk to us, I've had those awkward times in the mall. I don't go to the mall as much anymore because there's this thing, online shopping is great. But like when I'd go to the mall, these teenagers, they'd run up to you and awkwardly give you a hug, and you kind of you can't shift them over to the sideways hug a little bit. You don't have time to roll out your paper saying, hey, appropriate touches. You don't have any time for that. Next thing you know, they're like hugging you, you're moving like this, and they're with their parents. And his parents are like, who the heck is this balded beard guy that my child is running up to so affirmingly? And so it's like, I work with him at church, really. But it's a good way to try to talk. But we've had those moments. I'm sure everybody has. But I don't know. Try to find creative ways. I don't know how to do it either, because a lot of parents want to be anonymous, and they just kind of want to, especially not church ones. And then when you get into high school or they're driving themselves, it's really hard to stay in contact with them.
Yeah. No, I love your point about transparency. That is so important. And I think that really speaks true to
people. Do know it's a church, even if they don't have any experience with church. They know that, so they expect something spiritual. It's like taking your kid to an indoor soccer place. You're not surprised if they came out of there hearing about soccer or playing soccer, right? You don't try to take your kid to a trampoline park and say, boy, I can't believe they were on trampolines. Now, when people bring their kid to a church, whether they're a Christ follower or have no experience with church, they expect that there must be some kind of spiritual component to it. So,
and it's probably more concerning to a parent than when you don't talk about God or Jesus or any of that. Then, well, what are they doing?
Right.
So yeah. I think combining that transparency with that relational piece that you were talking about, like asking questions and getting to know each other, that's where then you can start to create ministry programming ideas, a track to run on that would help equip parents. In my years of being a youth pastor, probably one of the best things that we did in that area, this was my wife's idea, so the credit goes to her.
There you go.
But we were sitting at dinner one night, and I was talking about, like, I hear all these parents and their needs. They don't know how to have some of these tough conversations with their students. And we do that well on a youth ministry side. And I was like, I wish there was a way for us just to have these big, awkward conversations, or to make that easier for parents, or to help equip parents. And she was like, well, then do it. Do it all together. And I was like, what? Like when you do, like when you talk about dating, in the youth ministry, what do you always do? You separate the guys, and then you separate the girls. And if there are any parents there, then you separate the parents, and you compartmentalize the whole thing. And she was like, then just have one big conversation with everyone in the room. So we started calling them uncensored nights. And man, our job as the youth ministry was like, I'll get up there and sweat it out and talk about the biblical principle. We did divorce, we did anxiety, we did depression, we did, we did, that was 8 years ago. We were talking about racial injustice, like all these things, but it was a goal to help parents have a conversation afterwards with their kids. And it was like, we're going to break the ice on it, and we're going to equip you. We'd send them home with resources. Here's questions. Here's scripture that you can do. Here's a study you can do together. Here's other resources if you want. And it was amazing because it was combining those two. We're going to be authentic. We're going to be real with each other, but we've had the relationship and the conversations.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, I love all that you're saying, because it's like, yeah, I mean, you're the hired professional, or you're the key leader, the volunteer. You're put in that spot, and you probably know more. Hopefully, you know more about youth ministry than anybody else in your team or in your church. But that doesn't mean that you know everything, And so you talking to your wife is a great example. It's like other people have great ideas, and being humble enough to use them. I think sometimes I think my pride got in the way, and I'd be like, it has to be my idea or else I'm not using it, and because I have to look like I'm the hero here. I don't want to give someone else credit. I mean, that's sinful and that's disgusting behavior, but that's the honest truth.
Yeah. Yeah. So Brad, we had a question come in on Facebook here. They said, when you made the shift to focusing more time on parents, what were the biggest side effects of that shift for you? And then they put in parentheses, like, what did those conversations look like? When did your how did your hours in your work week change? Things like that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the biggest shifts was, so now I'm going to date myself a little bit. So if you're like 20 something watching this, you're gonna be like, what in the world? I would, my PowerPoint might not have looked very nice. I mean, I remember those days where I was still using an overhead projector. You'd take those clear transparencies and you'd write on there. You'd swipe off the worship chords if you had that one kid in your group that played guitar. If you didn't have it, you didn't have music that night, whatever it was. Then you shift to, wow, we got a video projector. And it's like, wow, change. But what it did was that it meant like I didn't spend as much time finding the best game. Sometimes you just you only had so much time, sometimes because if you spend more time, so one of the side effects is some of your creativity time goes away in those things. I think that was one of the things I noticed. And the side effect also is you maybe don't look as indispensable as people maybe thought you were. It's kind of like you got to let other people get credit, which is a side effect. It's a win actually if you read the Bible, when other people are doing those things. But I think then when it comes to your work week and all those things, I'd still go to the football games, but then instead sit with the parents.
Yep.
Move from the student section and sit with the parents, or at least introduce yourself to them. Wait till the game's over, then talk and go up and introduce yourself to the parents. I think those are some small things where you're already using that time anyway. And that was one of the things that affected for me. So instead of trying to be the cool older brother, I started becoming an ally of the parent. Mm-hmm. But you still have to work, because you still want the kids to know that they can trust you. Because even my boys, I'm glad that my boys have other people that they can talk to about things that they don't want to talk to me about. And that's what's the beautiful part about it. So you want to still have that level of relationship with the students where they know that they can talk to you. You're not just going to run to mommy and daddy and tell them, or mom or dad, whoever they're living with. But having that, I don't know, it does change. It changes, but a lot of it just changes your perspective, because we all know how we spend our time. A lot of us make our calendars and we figure out where we can spend our time. And so maybe it's like having a parent meeting a half hour before youth group starts on a Wednesday or a Sunday night, and maybe connect in that way. So I think it's working smarter, not necessarily harder all the time.
Yeah, I think that's so good, because it may not change your hours a lot, but it may change your intention. It may change your focus.
Yeah.
And so even for the youth pastor that maybe doesn't go to a football game every Friday night, but you're at church on Sunday every morning, and you spend all your time into the students, or do you engage in with the parents? Do you find ways, right, to have those connection points? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
really.
and I think that's where if you can, I love college age people helping with teenagers. You put appropriate balances and stuff in there. But I like that because they can be the cool older brother or older sister. And then if there's a problem, they'll come find dad, if you will. But that way they can do a lot of the social interacting with the teenagers. But then it frees you up to be in the lobby to find your next youth worker, your next volunteer, or whatever it is between your church services, between the pews or the chairs, to find your next parent that will help. And just meet people and if you're not extroverted, it's okay, but just find ways to ask good questions and have the boldness to talk to people.
And so often, I think when you do that, the light bulbs come on for students, because it's now like students expect the youth pastor to say, hey, you should read your Bible and love God and share your faith, or whatever it may be. They expect you to say that. But the volunteer who's a parent, a college student that's there, they're not getting paid to do that. When they start saying those things, oh, wow, okay, like, sure. But then when like their parents start saying the same, like when the parents now have been equipped or know to,
Yeah.
like when you've communicated as a youth pastor, here's what we talked about this week. We did a series on this, and now parents can start asking those questions and encouraging the same things. It's like, then you see the students like really things start clicking.
And what you did is you just helped their home. You just helped home life. You just helped all of those things. And the fact that, just think about that, the Lord allows you to be part of that. It's amazing. Hey, one other thing I always think with parents, like when you're talking in your church lobby between services and stuff like that, one habit that I've always tried to have is not to talk critically about their child to them. I think like kids get enough critics all the time, and parents already know their kids' weaknesses. Because a lot of times, how many times have you said this to a parent? Hey, man, I just want to let you know that, Sally, she's just awesome, and we just really appreciate these things. And a parent would say, I hate when they do this. Well, you don't see what they're like at home. Like, well, yeah. So my response to parents is like, well, yeah, but I don't see what you're like at home either. I know I behave my worst at home when I let my guard down. But what I try to do is always be a cheerleader for them, because believe in something for those kids because we know if we believe the Bible, that God has put them on here for a purpose, and he has great things that he can do in their life. And so, hey, I want to let you know, this is what I see in your child. And if you speak highly of their children, their parents they'll be with you.
Yep. Yeah. Well, Brad, this is great. This is very wonderful. I hope that we've got some viewers who will make use of this resource, and who will, we prayed even before we started that the wheels would start turning for some people that maybe have that that shift in focus and perspective. Again, not to do away with student ministry, but to how do we complement, how do we support, encourage parents where we might see multiplication happen. So, Brad, thank you for being a part of this today.
Thanks, Blake. See you later.
Yeah, if you would just close us out in prayer and pray for our youth leaders. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I'd love to pray. Thank you very much. Oh, God, I just thank you so much. Lord, humbly, I can't, Lord, you know all of my imperfections and you know my flaws. But, Lord, the amount of love in which you've demonstrated towards me and towards anybody who's watching this video by sending your son, Jesus, into our world, Lord, and getting into our mess. And, Lord, and the fact that we have the great benefit of just having a relationship with you, the King of Heaven, maker of heaven and earth, Lord, we get to be with you. And Lord, and I pray for anyone who has decided to, or feeling called or working now, investing their lives in the next generation. Lord, what a great gift that is. What a great benefit it is for us to be able to impact people in their times where it's so difficult, a time where so much change that happens, Lord, but in a way that so much impact can be made. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for giving us not only a place in your family by calling us your children, but Lord, giving us a purpose, and it's to go and make disciples. And Lord, we get to do it. Lord, I pray for any of the youth leaders around here. Lord, I know also it can be discouraging at times. Lord, sometimes we do get beat up. Sometimes we have some people that just have unreal expectations and those things. Lord, I pray that you'll give them comfort and peace. Lord, that you'll work in those situations. But Lord, no matter what, you'll remind us, Lord, that we still are worthwhile in your eyes, Lord, and that you've given us an opportunity to lead. And Lord, that we find our worth and value completely in you. Lord, we love you and we thank you. Thanks for Eric and for what he's doing, Lord, to impact people all around the world. In your name we pray. Amen.